After our Christmas party, I hid in the closet to surprise my husband, but my daughter-in-law went in first and played a recording of a private conversation with him. My hands started to tremble, and I covered my mouth to keep myself from screaming. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The champagne flute still held traces of bubbles when I slipped into the hall closet, pulling the door almost shut behind me. 66 years old, and here I was, hiding like a schoolgirl planning to surprise my husband with an anniversary kiss when he came looking for his coat. Our Christmas party had been perfect. 30 guests, twinkling lights reflecting off the snow outside our Connecticut farmhouse, laughter echoing through rooms that usually held only Gerald and me these days. I pressed myself between winter coats that smelled of mothballs and cedar, my heart doing that silly flutter it still did after 42 years of marriage. Through the crack in the door, I could see the living room where our son Roger was helping his wife Nancy stack dessert plates. Our daughter-in-law moved with efficient precision, her designer dress somehow still immaculate after hours of hosting duties she'd insisted on taking over this year. "You really should let me handle the cleanup, Louise," she'd said earlier, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You've done enough. You must be exhausted at your age." At my age. As if 66 meant 1 foot in the grave. The last guests departed with hugs and promises to meet again before New Year's. I heard Gerald's deep voice thanking the Hendersons, heard the front door close, heard the blessed silence that follows a successful party. My hand was on the closet door, ready to spring my silly surprise, when footsteps approached, lighter than Gerald's distinctive heavy tread. Nancy appeared in the hallway, alone. She glanced back toward the kitchen where I could hear Roger's voice, then moved with sudden purpose to the closet. My breath caught. I pressed deeper into the coats, confusion replacing my playful anticipation. What was she doing? She pulled the door open wider. Not all the way, but enough to reach for something on the upper shelf. I held perfectly still, hidden in shadow behind Gerald's winter overcoat. Her hand closed around a small device I'd never seen before, something black and rectangular. My mind couldn't quite process what I was seeing. Nancy pulled out her phone with her other hand, connecting it to the device with practiced ease. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She tapped her screen, and suddenly my husband's voice filled the quiet hallway. Not Gerald speaking now, but a recording, clear as crystal. I know, Gerald's recorded voice said, heavy with something that sounded like guilt. "But we can't tell Louise. Not yet. She'd never understand." My hands began to shake. I pressed them against my mouth to keep from gasping. Nancy's voice came next on the recording, sweet and concerned. "But Gerald, she has a right to know. The farmhouse, the accounts, everything. She thinks it's all still in both your names." "It is," Gerald's voice insisted. Technically isn't legally," Nancy responded, and I could hear the smile in her recorded words. "You signed those transfer documents 3 months ago. Roger is already listed as primary owner. Your wife just doesn't know it yet." The closet walls seemed to close in. Transfer documents? Primary owner? The farmhouse had been in my family for 3 generations. My grandmother had built it with her own inheritance. Gerald and I had restored it together, room by room, year by year. Roger knew how much it meant to me. "Louise has been acting strange lately," Gerald's voice continued on the recording. "Forgetting things. Getting confused about dates. I think it's time we had her evaluated. If there's any sign of cognitive decline, the transition will be easier to explain. More legitimate." Ice flooded my veins. Forgetting things? I'd missed 1 doctor's appointment last month because Gerald had told me the wrong date. I'd questioned our anniversary plans because Nancy had mentioned a different restaurant than the one we'd reserved. Small things. Meaningless things. Or so I'd thought. "You're doing the right thing," Nancy's recorded voice soothed. "Protecting the estate, protecting Roger's inheritance. Your wife will thank you eventually. Once she's settled somewhere more appropriate for someone her age. Somewhere with care." The recording clicked off. Nancy slipped both the device and her phone into her designer handbag, smoothing her dress with satisfaction. She turned back toward the living room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor my grandmother had chosen in 1952. I remained frozen in the closet, coat wool scratching my face, the smell of cedar suddenly suffocating. My mind raced through the past months with new, horrible clarity. The misplaced keys I'd mentioned, only to have Gerald find them in my purse. Had he moved them there? The bills I'd supposedly forgotten to pay, causing late notices. I distinctly remembered writing those checks. The neighbor who'd stopped by asking if I was feeling all right after Gerald had apparently called expressing concern about my episodes. Episodes I'd never had. The closet door remained ajar. Through it, I watched Nancy rejoin Roger in the living room. My son, my boy, wrapped his arm around his wife's waist and kissed her temple. She whispered something I couldn't hear. He nodded, glancing toward the hallway where Gerald's study door stood closed. "Dad's working on the paperwork now," Roger said quietly, but sound carried in our old farmhouse. "Once Mom's evaluation is complete, everything will be official. We'll have her moved by spring." "The memory care facility in Hartford is very nice," Nancy replied. "I toured it last week. She'll be comfortable there." Comfortable. They'd already chosen my prison. Gerald emerged from his study, and I saw him properly for the first time in what felt like years, as if scales had fallen from my eyes. The man I'd loved since I was 24 years old. The father of my 2 children. The partner who'd held my hand through my mother's funeral and his father's long illness. This man had been systematically dismantling my life while I smiled and baked Christmas cookies. "It's done," Gerald announced, his voice carrying satisfaction. "The final documents are filed. The estate attorney said everything's airtight." He paused, looking around the living room, at the mantelpiece where my grandmother's clock still ticked, at the built-in bookshelves my father had constructed, at the bay window where I'd rocked both my children to sleep. "This place will make a nice rental property. Or Roger, you and Nancy might want to move in yourselves once Mom's gone," Roger finished, and there was no hesitation in his voice, no guilt. Nancy squeezed his hand. "Don't say it like that. She'll still be alive, just cared for, where she can't hurt herself or make poor decisions. Poor decisions. Like trusting my husband. Like loving my son." Gerald glanced toward the hallway, and I pressed deeper into the coats, my heart hammering so hard I feared they'd hear it. "We should check on her. Make sure she's all right. She seemed a bit confused earlier when the Hendersons mentioned our Mexico trip. She insisted we hadn't planned any trip." "Because we haven't," I whispered into the darkness. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Had I forgotten? Or had I never been told? "I'll get her," Nancy volunteered, moving toward the staircase. "She's probably in bed already. All that hosting really took it out of her. I couldn't let them find me in the closet. Couldn't let them know I'd heard. I slipped out as quietly as I could, my joints protesting, not from age, but from tension, and moved through the kitchen toward the back stairs. The old farmhouse had 3 staircases, a quirk of its additions over generations, and I'd never been more grateful for its eccentric layout. I made it to our bedroom and slipped under the covers fully clothed, forcing my breathing to slow, schooling my face into peaceful sleep. Moments later, I heard Nancy's light knock, heard the door open. "She's already asleep," Nancy called down softly. "Looks like she's out for the night." The door closed. Their voices faded as they retreated downstairs, and I lay there in the dark, in the bed I'd shared with Gerald for over 4 decades, in the house my grandmother had built, and I understood with crystal clarity that everything I'd believed about my life had been a carefully constructed lie. But I also understood something else, something that made my hands stop shaking, and my mind begin to work with a cold, clear precision I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was weak, confused, easy to manipulate. They'd underestimated me because of my age, because I'd always been kind and accommodating. They had no idea who they were dealing with. In the darkness, I reached for my phone, hidden under my pillow, exactly where I'd left it. My fingers moved with steady purpose as I opened my voice memo app and began to replay the sounds it had captured. I'd pressed record before hiding in the closet, thinking only to catch Gerald's surprised laughter at my silly hiding game. Instead, I'd caught everything. Every word Nancy had said, every revelation her recording had contained. And more than that, I'd captured her admitting to the existence of that hidden recording device, to the manipulation, to the plot. My phone had been recording the whole time. I saved the file, backed it up to 3 different cloud services, and then I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened my email and began scrolling through old messages, looking at them with new eyes. The canceled appointments that had made me seem forgetful. The changed plans that had made me appear confused. The concerned messages from friends asking about my health issues. Every single one had originated from Gerald's account or from helpful forwarded messages from Nancy. I sat up in bed, my mind racing through 42 years of marriage, seeing patterns I'd missed. Gerald had always managed our finances, but I'd signed every document, understood every investment. Or had I? When was the last time I'd actually reviewed our accounts? When had I last checked the deed to the farmhouse? The house settled around me with familiar creaks and groans. Somewhere downstairs, Gerald laughed at something Roger said. The sound that had once brought me comfort now made my stomach turn. I had questions. So many questions. But I knew with absolute certainty that I couldn't ask them. Not yet. Not directly. If they knew I'd discovered their plan, they'd accelerate it. They'd have me evaluated immediately. Would Gerald claim I was having delusions? Would Roger tell doctors his mother was becoming paranoid? How easy would it be to have me declared incompetent if my own family testified against me? I needed proof. I needed to understand exactly what they'd done and when. I needed to know if there was any way to undo it before I was shipped off to a memory care facility for problems I didn't have. I needed to know if the man I'd loved for 4 decades had any conscience left at all. And I needed to do all of this while pretending everything was normal. While they watched me for signs of the cognitive decline they'd been fabricating, while they waited for the perfect moment to spring their trap. My phone buzzed with a text. Gerald, don't wait up. Roger and I are having a nightcap in the study. Go to sleep, honey. Honey. The endearment felt like acid. I texted back, sleep well. Love you. The lie tasted bitter, but it was necessary. They couldn't know. Not yet. I lay back down. But sleep was impossible. My mind worked through possibilities, discarding and refining plans. Tomorrow was Sunday. Gerald would expect me to make our traditional family breakfast. Nancy and Roger were staying through the weekend, sleeping in the guest room that had once been Roger's childhood bedroom. I would smile. I would cook. I would play the role of the aging, slightly confused wife and mother they expected to see. And while I played that role, I would begin to dismantle their carefully constructed conspiracy, piece by piece. Because they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated a woman who'd spent 66 years learning to read people, to manage a household, to navigate the complex dynamics of family and community. They'd mistaken kindness for weakness and patience for ignorance. I'd spent 4 decades as Gerald's wife, but before that, I'd been my grandmother's granddaughter. And she'd been a woman who'd built a farmhouse and a life through the Depression and 2 world wars. She'd taught me that strength wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, strategic, and absolutely relentless. They wanted to take my home, my identity, my freedom. Let them try. Sunday morning arrived with pale winter light filtering through frost-covered windows. I rose at 6, as I always did, my body moving through familiar routines while my mind raced through darker territory. In the bathroom mirror, I studied my face, the lines around my eyes, the silver in my hair that I'd never bothered to dye. Did I look like someone losing her mind? Or did I look like what I was? A woman who'd been betrayed by the people she loved most. I dressed carefully in comfortable slacks and a soft sweater, the uniform of a grandmother preparing Sunday breakfast. Nothing threatening. Nothing that would raise suspicion. Downstairs, I started the coffee and began pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. Eggs, bacon, the sourdough bread I'd baked Friday. My hands moved with practiced efficiency, but my ears strained for any sound from above. Gerald's snoring had stopped around 5. I'd lain awake listening to it, wondering how I'd slept beside that sound for 42 years without knowing the man who made it. The study door stood slightly ajar. I glanced up the stairs, still quiet, and slipped inside. Gerald's desk was neat as always, everything in its place. Too neat. I'd teased him over the years about his obsessive organization, but now I understood it differently. A neat desk meant he'd know if anything was disturbed. I'd have to be careful. I pulled out my phone and started photographing everything. The calendar with his appointments, the stack of mail, mostly already opened, the legal pad with notes in his precise handwriting. Then I tried the desk drawers. Locked, all of them. When had he started locking his desk? Mom? I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Roger stood in the doorway, hair rumpled from sleep, wearing the plaid pajama pants I'd given him last Christmas. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "Just looking for stamps. I have thank you notes to send from the party." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Dad keeps stamps in the kitchen drawer. You know that." Did I? I'd sent hundreds of letters over the years, but suddenly I couldn't remember where we kept the stamps. Was that real confusion or manufactured doubt? "Of course," I laughed, moving past him. "Still half asleep, I guess. Coffee's ready." Roger followed me to the kitchen, and I felt his gaze on my back like a physical weight. I poured him coffee, added cream the way he liked it, and handed it to him with a smile. "Your father still sleeping?" I asked. "He was up late working on some investment papers." Roger sipped his coffee, studying me over the rim. "How are you feeling today, Mom? You seemed a bit off last night. Nancy was worried." Off. The word landed like a small blade between my ribs. "I'm fine," I said lightly. "Maybe a bit tired from all the hosting. But it was a lovely party, wasn't it?" "It was," he agreed, but something in his tone felt rehearsed. "Though Dad mentioned you seemed confused when the Hendersons brought up the Mexico trip. You don't remember discussing it?" I cracked eggs into a bowl, keeping my movements steady. This was a test. Every word I said would be reported back, analyzed for signs of cognitive decline. "Oh, I remember now," I said carefully. "February, wasn't it? I'd just gotten the dates mixed up with our anniversary dinner reservation. Too many things on the calendar." It was a lie. I had no memory of any Mexico trip because there had been no discussion of one, at least not with me. But I couldn't say that. Couldn't give them ammunition. Roger relaxed slightly. "That's right. February. We were thinking of joining you, actually. Nancy's never been to Cabo." Cabo. Now I had a location. I filed it away. Nancy appeared then, perfectly dressed even at 7 in the morning, her blonde hair smooth and makeup already applied. "Something smells wonderful," she said, but her eyes went straight to Roger, a silent question passing between them. He gave her a small nod. Test passed. For now. Gerald came down minutes later, kissing my cheek with the same casual affection he'd shown for decades. "Morning, sweetheart. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said truthfully. "Too much excitement from the party." We sat down to breakfast, and I played my role perfectly. The doting wife, the loving mother, the sweet grandmother asking about their plans for the holidays. But beneath the performance, I watched them. Really watched them. Nancy dominated the conversation, steering it subtly but relentlessly. When I mentioned needing to check our bank balance before ordering new curtains for the guest room, she interjected, "Oh, Louise, you should let Gerald handle the finances. You have enough on your plate." When I suggested Roger and I take a walk around the property to check the old oak tree that had worried me during the last storm, she stood immediately. "I'll come too. It's icy out there. You shouldn't go alone." She didn't want me alone with my son. Didn't want me asking questions she couldn't monitor. After breakfast, Gerald retreated to his study, and Roger helped Nancy clean up despite my protests. "You cooked, Mom. Sit down. Relax." I sat at the kitchen table with my cooling coffee, feeling useless in my own home. Through the window, I could see the barn where my grandfather had kept horses, now empty except for storage. The fields stretched beyond, covered in snow, bordered by the stone walls my great-grandfather had built stone by stone. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter, Jane, who lived in Oregon with her wife and their teenage twins. "Hope the party went well. Sorry we couldn't make it. FaceTime later? Jane." My stomach tightened. Did she know? Was she part of this? Or had they kept it from her too? I texted back. "Party was lovely. Yes, let's talk soon. Miss you." Then I opened my email, searching for anything from Gerald's attorney. Nothing in my inbox. But what if he'd set up filters? What if important emails were being redirected? I needed access to his computer, needed to see our bank accounts, needed to find those transfer documents he'd mentioned. But how could I do any of that with 3 people watching my every move? The doorbell rang. "I'll get it," Nancy called, already moving toward the entrance. Through the kitchen doorway, I watched her open the door to a woman in a professional gray suit, carrying a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Morrison?" the woman asked. "I'm Dr. Sheila Aldridge. I believe your husband scheduled an appointment?" My blood ran cold. Nancy's smile was brilliant. "Oh, yes. Thank you so much for coming on a Sunday. Louise," she called toward the kitchen. "Dr. Aldridge is here." I stood slowly, my mind racing. This was it, the evaluation Gerald had mentioned on the recording. They were moving faster than I'd anticipated. Gerald emerged from his study, his expression carefully arranged into concern. "Louise, honey, Dr. Aldridge is a neuropsychologist. I've been worried about some of the memory issues you've been having, and I thought it would be good to get a professional opinion, just to be safe." The trap was closing. If I refused, I'd seem defensive, paranoid, classic signs of cognitive decline. If I agreed, I'd be walking into an evaluation designed to find problems whether they existed or not. I looked at the doctor, at Gerald, at Nancy's satisfied smile, at Roger hovering uncertainly in the background. My son looked uncomfortable, at least. That was something. "I'm not sure what memory issues you mean," I said carefully, directing my words to Dr. Aldridge. "But I'm happy to talk with you." "Wonderful," Dr. Aldridge said warmly. "Is there somewhere private we could sit?" "The living room," Nancy suggested quickly. "It's comfortable and quiet, but not private." The living room opened directly onto the kitchen and hallway. They'd be able to hear every word. "Actually," I said, "I'd prefer the sunroom. It's my favorite spot in the house." The sunroom was at the back of the house, separated by 2 doors. Harder to eavesdrop. Dr. Aldridge nodded. "That sounds perfect." I led her through the house, feeling Gerald's eyes on my back. In the sunroom, surrounded by windows overlooking the snow-covered garden, I sat in my usual chair. Dr. Aldridge took the seat opposite, pulling out a tablet and a few printed forms. "Mrs. Morrison, I want you to know this is just a preliminary conversation," she began. "Your husband expressed some concerns about occasional forgetfulness, confusion about dates and plans. These things are common as we age, and often they're completely benign. But it's good to establish a baseline." "What specifically did my husband tell you?" I asked. Dr. Aldridge consulted her notes. "Missed appointments, misplaced items, confusion about planned trips, difficulty following conversations. He mentioned you seemed disoriented at your Christmas party. Each item was a carefully planted lie or a misrepresentation of a manufactured incident." "Doctor, may I ask you something?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm and clear. "If someone wanted to make another person appear cognitively impaired, what would be the most effective methods?" Her eyebrows rose. "That's an unusual question." "Is it?" I pulled out my phone, opening the voice memo I'd recorded. "Before we continue this evaluation, I'd like you to hear something." I played the recording. Not all of it. Just the portion where Nancy's device had captured Gerald discussing my evaluation and the need to have me settled somewhere more appropriate. Dr. Aldridge's expression shifted from professional neutrality to sharp attention. When the recording ended, silence filled the sunroom. "Mrs. Morrison," Dr. Aldridge said slowly, "this conversation has taken an unexpected turn. What you've just played for me suggests a concerning situation, but it's not within my purview to what? To acknowledge that my husband may be orchestrating a fraudulent diagnosis?" I kept my voice level. "Doctor, I don't know if you were aware of his intentions, but I am not experiencing cognitive decline. I am, however, experiencing a family conspiracy to remove me from my home and my assets." Dr. Aldridge closed her tablet. "If what you're saying is true, you should contact an attorney. I can't proceed with this evaluation under these circumstances. Will you tell my husband that?" She hesitated. I'll tell him I don't believe an evaluation is warranted at this time, based on my conversation with you. You seem fully oriented, articulate, and capable. What he does with that information is his choice. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Thank you. We emerged from the sunroom to find Gerald, Roger, and Nancy clustered in the kitchen, their conversation stopping abruptly as we appeared. That was quick, Nancy said, her smile tight. Dr. Aldridge addressed Gerald directly. Mr. Morrison, I've spoken with your wife, and I don't see any indication of cognitive impairment that would warrant further evaluation at this time. She's sharp, oriented, and functioning well. If you have concerns in the future, you're welcome to contact me. But for now, I don't believe my services are needed. Gerald's face went carefully blank. I see. Well, thank you for coming. After Dr. Aldridge left, the silence in the kitchen was thick enough to choke on. I don't understand, Gerald said finally, his voice edged with frustration. Louise, you've been so forgetful lately. The doctor should have what? I interrupted gently. Found problems that don't exist? Nancy's expression hardened. Mom, we're only trying to help. You have to admit you've been off lately. Have I? I looked at each of them in turn. Or have I simply been paying more attention? Roger shifted uncomfortably. Mom, what's that supposed to mean? I could have confronted them then. Could have played the rest of the recording, demanded explanations, fought it out in the open. But I'd learned something important from Dr. Aldridge's visit. They were moving forward with or without medical justification. The evaluation had been a formality, a rubber stamp they'd hoped to collect. If I fought now, they'd adapt. They'd find another doctor, another angle. They'd accelerate their plans before I could mount a proper defense. So instead, I smiled. Nothing, sweetheart. I think I'm just tired. Maybe I'll lie down for a bit. I retreated upstairs, feeling their eyes on me, knowing they were already regrouping, planning their next move. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. I needed help, but who could I trust? Jane was 3,000 miles away. My closest friends would never believe me. Gerald was beloved in our community, the picture of a devoted husband. And if I went to the police, what would I say? That my family was planning to commit me? Based on what evidence? A recording that could be dismissed as a misunderstanding? No. I needed something concrete. Documents. Financial records. Proof of the property transfer. I opened my laptop and tried to access our bank accounts. Password incorrect. I tried 3 more combinations, all rejected. Gerald had changed the passwords. I tried our brokerage account. Same result. My hands shook as I navigated to the county records website. Property deeds were public record. If Gerald had transferred the farmhouse title, it would be recorded there. I searched for our address, and my stomach dropped. The deed had been filed 3 weeks ago. Primary owner, Roger Jonathan Morrison. Secondary owner, Gerald Thomas Morrison. My name appeared nowhere on the document that represented my grandmother's legacy, my family's history, my home of 40 years. A knock on the bedroom door made me slam the laptop shut. Louise? Gerald's voice, concerned and gentle. Can I come in? Of course. He entered, closing the door behind him. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Husband and wife, strangers wearing familiar faces. That was embarrassing with Dr. Aldridge, he said. I really thought she'd find something. The way you've been acting. How have I been acting, Gerald? He sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. Confused. Forgetful. Not yourself. I'm worried about you, sweetheart. We all are. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. How long had he been rehearsing it? I appreciate your concern, I said carefully. But I feel fine. Maybe you're worrying over nothing. His jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just for a moment. Maybe. But I think we should consider getting a second opinion. There are other specialists. Other tests. No. The word came out harder than I intended. I softened my tone. I don't think that's necessary right now. Let's just take it one day at a time. Gerald studied me, and I saw calculation in his eyes. He was wondering if I knew something, if I suspected. I kept my expression open, slightly tired, slightly confused. The woman he wanted to see. All right, he said finally. One day at a time. But Louise, promise me something. If you start feeling confused or disoriented, you'll tell me right away. Will you promise me that? I promise, I lied. After he left, I sat in the growing darkness of late afternoon, my mind working through possibilities. They'd taken my property. They'd changed my passwords. They'd tried to get me diagnosed. What was next? My phone buzzed with an email notification. I opened it, expecting spam, and froze. The sender was Gerald's attorney, Richard Palmer. The subject line read, Morrison Estate Planning, Final Documents. But the email wasn't addressed to Gerald. It was addressed to me, marked as sent accidentally to my address instead of Gerald's similar email. A simple typo that had exposed everything. I opened the message, my heart pounding, and began to read the attachment, a complete summary of the estate transfer, the power of attorney documents awaiting my signature, the application to Hartford Memorial Care Facility, and a timeline. A timeline that ended with my involuntary commitment in 6 weeks. Outside my window, snow began to fall again, covering the farmhouse grounds in white. Beautiful, deceptive, like the life I'd thought I had. I had 6 weeks to fight back, 6 weeks to prove I was competent, to reclaim my property, to expose the conspiracy that had been woven around me by the people who were supposed to love me most. 6 weeks before I lost everything. Monday morning arrived with brutal clarity. Roger and Nancy had finally left, their departure filled with concerned hugs and whispered conversations with Gerald that stopped whenever I entered a room. I smiled through it all, waved from the porch as their car disappeared down the long driveway, and then I got to work. Gerald had a board meeting in Hartford. I'd seen it on his calendar during my brief study visit. He'd be gone from 9 until at least 3. That gave me 6 hours. Drive carefully, I said, kissing his cheek as he gathered his briefcase and coat. The roads might still be icy. I'll be fine. He paused at the door, studying me with that new wariness I'd seen since Dr. Aldridge's visit. What are you planning to do today? Oh, the usual. Some reading. Maybe I'll organize the holiday decorations before putting them away. I kept my voice light, domestic, unthreatening. Nothing exciting. He nodded, satisfied, and left. I watched from the window as his car reached the end of our driveway and turned toward town. Then I waited another 5 minutes, making sure he hadn't forgotten anything and wouldn't turn back. The moment I was certain, I moved. Gerald's study first. The locked drawers had to contain something important. People don't lock empty drawers. I'd spent Sunday night researching how to pick simple desk locks, feeling ridiculous and desperate in equal measure. But desperation, I'd learned, was a powerful teacher. The first drawer opened after 3 minutes of fumbling with a paperclip and a bobby pin. Inside, files. So many files. I pulled them out, spreading them across Gerald's desk, photographing each page with my phone. Investment accounts, transferred to Roger 3 months ago, just as the recording had indicated. The retirement fund we'd built together over 4 decades moved into our son's name with forged signatures on the authorization forms. My signature, but not my hand. I'd signed enough documents over the years to know my own writing. The second drawer. Correspondence with Richard Palmer, the estate attorney. Email printouts discussing the Louise situation. Strategies for obtaining power of attorney. Recommendations for memory care facilities. One email made my hands shake so badly I nearly dropped my phone. Given Louise's documented history of confusion and her age, Palmer had written, a judge would likely grant conservatorship without significant resistance. The medical evaluation is a formality, but even without it, we have enough witness statements to proceed. Witness statements. From whom? The third drawer answered that question. Affidavits, signed and notarized. Our neighbor, Martha Henderson, stating she'd witnessed me wandering the property at odd hours, seeming disoriented. Our handyman, Robert Walsh, claiming I'd forgotten conversations we'd had about repairs and had repeatedly asked him the same questions. Dr. Susan Park, our family physician, noting my increasingly frequent concerns about memory lapses during appointments. All lies, or were they? I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to remember. Had I walked the property at night? Yes. During last summer's heat wave, I'd taken evening strolls. Disoriented? No. Enjoying the cooler air. Had I asked Robert about repairs? Of course. We'd discussed replacing the barn roof multiple times because I wanted multiple quotes. That wasn't confusion. That was due diligence. Dr. Park's statement was the most troubling. I did remember mentioning memory concerns, but only because Gerald had been pointing out my supposed lapses so frequently I'd started questioning myself. I'd asked the doctor if stress could cause forgetfulness, if this was normal aging. She'd reassured me it was. But apparently she'd documented those conversations very differently in her notes. I photographed everything, my anger building with each page. This wasn't a spontaneous plan. This was a months-long campaign, carefully orchestrated with multiple people involved, some knowingly, some manipulated into participation. But why? The farmhouse was valuable, yes, but Roger had a successful career. Nancy came from money. Her family owned a chain of dental practices across Connecticut. Why would they need to steal from me? The bottom drawer held the answer. Loan documents. Roger had borrowed against expected inheritance to invest in some tech startup. $300,000, due in full by March 1st. The startup had failed. He was facing bankruptcy unless he could liquidate assets, specifically the farmhouse and the investment accounts that had been in Gerald's and my name. My son wasn't just stealing from me. He was desperate. And Gerald, my husband, had enabled it all. Why? I dug deeper, finding older documents, and there it was. Gerald's own failing investment. He'd lost nearly half our retirement fund in a series of bad stock decisions, hidden from me behind password-protected accounts and forged statements. He'd been covering his losses by slowly draining our savings, and when that ran out, he'd needed a new solution. Erasing me from the picture gave them access to everything without my knowledge or consent. I sat in Gerald's chair, surrounded by evidence of betrayal, and felt something inside me harden into steel. This wasn't about a farmhouse anymore. This was about two men who decided an older woman was easier to eliminate than to be honest with. My phone rang, shattering the silence. Jane's photo filled the screen. I almost didn't answer. I was too angry, too hurt, and I didn't trust my voice. But Jane called so rarely during work hours that I picked up. "Mom?" Her voice was tight with concern. "I just got the strangest email from Dad." My heart rate spiked. "What did it say?" "He wants me to sign something. A statement about your mental health. He said you've been having serious memory problems and that I should document any concerns I've noticed during our calls." She paused. "Mom? What's going on? You've seemed fine to me." Relief flooded through me so intensely I felt dizzy. Jane didn't know. More than that, she was questioning it. "Sweetheart," I said carefully, "I need you to do something for me, and I need you to trust me. Don't sign anything. Don't respond to your father's email, and don't tell him we talked about this." Silence on the other end. Then, "You're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry. But I can't explain everything over the phone. Can you come home? As soon as possible?" "Mom, please, Jane. I need you. Your brother and your father." My voice cracked despite my best efforts. "Things are not what they seem." Another pause. I could hear her breathing, thinking, deciding whether her mother was paranoid or telling the truth. "I can get a flight tomorrow," she said finally. "But Mom, if this is something serious, shouldn't we involve the police?" "Not yet. I need to show you something first. I need you to see the evidence." "Evidence of what?" "Of why your father thinks having me declared incompetent is worth destroying our family." The words hung in the air between us. 3,000 miles and a lifetime of trust. "I'll be there tomorrow evening," Jane said quietly. "Don't do anything until I arrive. Promise me." "I promise." After we hung up, I looked at the clock. 11:30. I had hours before Gerald returned, and I wasn't done. I copied every file from his computer onto a flash drive, using techniques I'd learned from YouTube videos watched on my phone at 3 in the morning. I photographed his calendar, his contact lists, his email folders. Then I carefully returned everything to its place, relocking the drawers. In our bedroom, I checked the closet where Nancy had hidden her recording device. It was gone. She'd taken it with her. But I searched anyway. running my hands along shelves, checking pockets, looking for anything else they might have planted. I found it in Gerald's nightstand. A small camera, disguised as a clock, pointed directly at the bed. How long had it been there? What had they been recording? I left it in place. Removing it would alert them. Instead, I adjusted it slightly so it pointed at the wall, a subtle shift they might not notice immediately. Then I went to the kitchen and did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the old bread box on top of the refrigerator, reached behind it, and pulled out a small metal box. My grandmother's emergency fund, she'd called it. $2,000 in cash, wrapped in plastic, hidden away for just in case. Well, just in case had arrived. I was counting the bills when I heard a car in the driveway. My stomach lurched. Gerald wasn't due back for hours. I shoved the money into my pocket and moved to the window. Not Gerald's sedan, a white SUV, Nancy's car. She got out, looking around with quick, nervous movements, and headed for the front door. I opened it before she could knock. "Nancy, what a surprise." Her smile was brittle. "Louise, I forgot my phone charger yesterday. I think I left it in the guest room." A lie. I'd cleaned the guest room thoroughly that morning. There had been no charger. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." She moved past me, and I caught a whiff of her perfume. Expensive, floral, cloying. She headed upstairs, and I followed at a distance, watching as she entered the guest room and made a show of checking the outlets and nightstand. "Found it," she called, emerging with a charger I'd never seen before, likely one she'd brought with her. But she wasn't leaving. She stood in the hallway, looking toward our bedroom, toward Gerald's study, her mind clearly working through something. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, turning to me with that concerned expression I'd come to loathe. "You seemed upset yesterday after Dr. Aldridge left." "I'm fine." "Why wouldn't I be?" "Well, Gerald mentioned you were confused about some of the doctor's questions. He's worried the stress of the holidays might have been too much for you." There it was. The gaslighting, the constant reinforcement of a narrative that didn't exist. "Nancy," I said quietly, "why are you really here?" Her mask slipped just for a moment. I saw calculation in her eyes, a cold assessment. "I told you, my charger. You're checking on me, making sure I'm still playing the role of the confused old woman, making sure I haven't figured it out." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Louise, that's paranoid. We're family. We care about you." "Do you?" I stepped closer. "Is that why you've been helping Gerald transfer my assets to Roger? Is that why you recorded that conversation in the hallway?" Her face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. I heard it all, Nancy. Every word. The transfer documents. The memory care facility. The plan to have me evaluated and removed." She recovered quickly. I had to give her that. Her expression shifted from shock to pity. "Oh, Louise, this is exactly what we've been worried about. These paranoid delusions. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months, and I have evidence, recordings, documents, photographs, everything you and Gerald have done." Nancy's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing. And even if you're not, who would believe you? You're a senior citizen making accusations against her devoted husband and loving son. We have doctors, lawyers, witnesses, all saying you're experiencing cognitive decline. Your word against all of ours?" She shook her head. "You'll end up exactly where we planned, just faster." The mask was completely off now. This was Nancy without pretense. Cold, ruthless, and absolutely certain of her victory. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "Your house?" She laughed. "Louise, this stopped being your house the moment you signed those papers 3 months ago." "I never signed any papers." "You did. You just don't remember. That's the beauty of it. The confusion, the memory loss. It's all documented. And if you try to fight this, if you make a scene, we'll have you committed for your own safety." "Is that what you want? To be the crazy old woman who turned against her family?" I wanted to scream at her, to show her the evidence I'd gathered, to wipe that smug certainty off her face. But I held back, because she'd revealed something important. They thought I'd already signed papers, which meant somewhere there were documents with my forged signature. documents I could prove I'd never seen, never signed, never agreed to. Leave, I repeated. Now. Nancy studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. Fine. But Louise, this ends one way. You can make it easy on yourself and everyone else, or you can make it hard. Either way, you're not staying in this house. Roger needs it. He's earned it. And you? She smiled. You've had your time. She left, her heels clicking down the stairs, the front door closing with finality behind her. I stood in the hallway, shaking with rage and fear in equal measure, and I knew with absolute certainty that my timeline had just collapsed. Nancy would tell Gerald about our conversation. They'd accelerate their plans. I might not have 6 weeks anymore. I might not even have 6 days. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Morrison, this is Dr. Aldridge. I've been thinking about our conversation. If you need professional support documenting your situation, I may be able to help. Call me if interested. A lifeline. Maybe. Another text, this one from Jane. Flight booked. Arrive 6 p.m. tomorrow. Hang on, Mom. Tomorrow evening. I had to survive until then. Had to keep playing my role. Keep pretending I didn't know what was coming. I went downstairs and started preparing dinner, my hands moving through familiar motions while my mind raced through scenarios. When Gerald came home, I'd smile. I'd ask about his meeting. I'd be the wife he expected. And I'd be counting down the hours until my daughter arrived and the real fight could begin. Because Nancy had made one critical mistake in her moment of honesty. She'd confirmed everything I suspected. The forged documents existed. The conspiracy was real. And most importantly, she'd underestimated what a woman with nothing left to lose could do. They wanted a war, they'd get one. But it would be fought with evidence and witnesses, with lawyers and documentation, with every ounce of intelligence I'd accumulated over 66 years of living. I'd spent my life being kind, being accommodating, being the peacemaker. That woman was gone. And the woman who remained was done being underestimated. Gerald came home at 4:30, earlier than expected. I was in the kitchen preparing pot roast, his favorite, when I heard his car. Through the window, I watched him sit in the driver's seat for several minutes, phone pressed to his ear, his face animated with frustration. Nancy had called him. I was certain of it. I stirred the gravy and waited. He entered through the mudroom, his expression carefully neutral by the time he reached the kitchen. Something smells good. Pot roast. I thought we could use a nice dinner. Just the two of us. He set his briefcase down, studying me with that new wariness that had become permanent. How was your day? Quiet. I did some reading. Took a nap. The lies came easily now. Nancy stopped by to get her phone charger. It was nice to see her. His shoulders relaxed slightly. So Nancy hadn't told him everything. Or if she had, he was waiting to see what I'd reveal. That's nice, he said. Listen, Louise. I need to talk to you about something important. Here it was. I turned from the stove, wiping my hands on a towel, and gave him my full attention. Gerald pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. Sit down, sweetheart. I sat, my pulse quickening despite my outward calm. I've been doing a lot of thinking since Dr. Aldridge's visit, he began. And I realize I may have been premature in arranging that evaluation. But Louise, I'm still concerned. We both need to face the fact that we're getting older, and we need to make sure our affairs are in order. What kind of affairs? Legal, financial, medical? He reached across the table, taking my hand. His touch felt like ice. I've spoken with Richard Palmer, and he's recommended we update our power of attorney documents. It's just a precaution, but if something happened to either of us, we need to make sure the other person can make decisions. We already have power of attorney documents, I said carefully. We signed them 15 years ago. Those are outdated. The laws have changed. These new documents are more comprehensive. They cover healthcare decisions, financial management, property transfers, everything we need to protect each other. Protect. The word was bitter in my mouth. What happens if I don't sign them? His expression flickered. Surprise, then concern. Why wouldn't you sign them? Unless... He leaned forward, his voice dropping to gentle worry. Louise, are you having one of those confused moments? You know I would never ask you to sign anything that wasn't in your best interest. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed him. I'm not confused, I said quietly. I'm careful. When can I review these documents? Richard's bringing them by tomorrow. We can go through them together, make sure you understand everything. He squeezed my hand. I know this is scary, thinking about getting older, about what might happen, but we're in this together. We always have been. 42 years of marriage, and he could look me in the eye and lie without hesitation. What time tomorrow? I asked. 2:00. He'll come to the house. Gerald stood, kissing the top of my head. I'm going to wash up before dinner. As soon as he left the room, I pulled out my phone and texted Jane. Lawyer coming tomorrow at 2 p.m. with documents. Need you here before then. Can you come earlier? Her response came seconds later. We'll try to get morning flight. Don't sign anything. I deleted the text exchange and slipped my phone back into my pocket just as Gerald returned. Dinner was torture. I chewed pot roast that tasted like sawdust and made conversation about nothing. The weather, the Hendersons' new puppy, whether we needed to order more firewood. Gerald played his part perfectly, the attentive husband concerned about his aging wife. After dinner, he retreated to his study. Just a few emails, he said. I'll be up soon. I cleaned the kitchen, then went upstairs. But instead of going to our bedroom, I slipped into the guest room and called Dr. Aldridge from the number she'd texted me. She answered on the second ring. Mrs. Morrison, I'm glad you called. You said you might be able to help document my situation. I did. And I've been thinking about it more. What you played for me on Sunday, if that recording is authentic, and if you're telling the truth about not experiencing cognitive decline, then what's happening to you is elder abuse, financial exploitation at minimum, possibly false imprisonment if they succeed in having you committed. The clinical terms made it real in a way it hadn't been before. My husband's attorney is coming tomorrow with power of attorney documents. They want me to sign them. Don't, Dr. Aldridge said sharply. Mrs. Morrison, once you sign those documents, they can legally control everything. Your finances, your health care, where you live, and based on what I heard in that recording, they will use those powers immediately. I won't sign, but they're not going to accept that. My daughter-in-law basically threatened me today. She said if I fight them, they'll have me committed for my own safety. Silence. Then, do you have somewhere safe you can go? Family? Friends? My daughter's flying in tomorrow morning. But doctor, I need more than a place to hide. I need to prove they've been lying about my mental state. I need evidence that I'm competent. I can provide that. I can do a comprehensive evaluation, document everything, provide testimony if needed. But Mrs. Morrison, you need to understand. If your husband has already convinced other medical professionals that you're impaired, this becomes a he said, she said situation. You need more than my evaluation. You need proof of the conspiracy itself. I have recordings, documents, photographs of everything in my husband's study. Good. But you also need to secure your legal rights before they move forward. Have you contacted an attorney? No, I don't know who to trust. My husband knows every lawyer in this county. Then you need to go outside the county. I can recommend someone. Julia Winters, she's in New Haven. Specializes in elder law and financial abuse cases. She's aggressive, and she doesn't back down. I wrote down the number Dr. Aldridge gave me, my hand shaking. This was real now. I was building a case, assembling a team, preparing for war. Mrs. Morrison, Dr. Aldridge said quietly, I want you to know, what you're doing takes tremendous courage. Many people in your situation wouldn't fight back. They'd let themselves be erased because it seems easier than standing up to their own family. I spent 66 years learning who I am, I said. I'm not letting them erase that because it's convenient for them. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of the guest room and called Julia Winters' emergency line. A recorded message said she'd return calls within 24 hours. I left a message, trying to summarize my situation in 2 minutes, knowing I sounded paranoid and desperate. I was about to hang up when a voice interrupted the recording. Mrs. Morrison, this is Julia Winters. I'm actually working late. Tell me what's happening. Relief flooded through me. I told her everything. The recording, the forged documents, the conspiracy, the timeline. She listened without interruption, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "How fast can you get to my office?" she asked. My husband is downstairs. He's watching me. "Tomorrow then. First thing. Before the other attorney arrives. Can you do that? My daughter's flying in. I need to pick her up from the airport." "Bring her with you. What time does she land?" "Around noon." "Perfect. My office at 8 a.m. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Don't bring anything that has GPS tracking. Assume your phone is monitored. Can you get access to a different vehicle?" I thought of my neighbor, Martha Henderson, who'd signed one of those affidavits against me. But Martha was gone for the winter, staying with her daughter in Florida. Her car would be in her garage. "Yes, I can get a car." "Good. Mrs. Morrison, I need you to listen carefully. What you're describing is a coordinated effort to defraud you of your assets and your freedom. These people are not going to stop because you ask nicely. They're going to escalate. So we need to move faster than they do. Understand?" "Yes. 8 a.m. Don't be late." I hung up and sat in the darkness, my heart pounding. Tomorrow, everything would come to a head. Either I'd gain the upper hand, or I'd lose everything. Downstairs, I heard Gerald's study door open, heard his footsteps on the stairs. I slipped out of the guest room and into our bedroom, changing into my nightgown, climbing into bed. When he entered, I pretended to be reading. "Good book?" he asked. I looked at the cover, something I'd grabbed from the nightstand without thinking. A mystery novel about a woman who discovers her husband is trying to kill her. "Very good," I said. Gerald got ready for bed with his usual routine, and I watched him in the bathroom mirror, this stranger wearing my husband's face. When had he become someone I didn't know? Or had he always been this person, and I'd simply refused to see it? He climbed into bed beside me, and I forced myself not to flinch when he kissed my cheek. "Good night, sweetheart. I love you." The words that had once meant everything now meant nothing. "Good night," I said, unable to force the rest of the lie past my lips. I lay awake long after his breathing deepened into sleep, watching shadows move across the ceiling, planning my escape route for the morning. At 3 a.m., I slipped out of bed and went downstairs, moving through the dark house with the familiarity of 40 years. In the kitchen, I found our spare car keys, including the set for Martha's garage that she'd given us years ago for emergency access. I packed a bag with the flash drive containing copies of all Gerald's documents, the recordings on my phone, printouts of everything I'd photographed. I hid it in the mudroom behind the winter boots. Then I did something that felt like betrayal, even though I was the one being betrayed. I took my wedding rings off and tucked them into my pocket. If I needed to pawn them, if I needed cash they couldn't trace, I would. They were just metal and stones. They didn't mean what I'd thought they meant. At 4 a.m., Gerald's phone buzzed on his nightstand. I heard him stir, reach for it, then get up quietly and go into the bathroom. Through the door, I heard his whispered voice. "I understand. Yes. Tomorrow then. I'll make sure she signs." When he came back to bed, I kept my breathing steady, pretending sleep. At 6, my own phone rang. Jane's number. "Mom?" Her voice was thick with worry. "My early flight got canceled. There's weather moving in. I won't be there until late tonight at the earliest." My heart sank. Tomorrow evening was too late. The attorney was coming at 2. Gerald would pressure me to sign. If I refused, if I revealed I knew everything, what would they do? "It's okay, sweetie," I said, aware of Gerald stirring beside me. "Just get here when you can." "Mom, I'm so sorry. I know you need me. I'll be fine. I promise." But after I hung up, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if that was true. Without Jane, I'd be facing the attorney alone, facing Gerald alone. Could I hold out? Could I refuse to sign without them forcing the issue? At 7:30, I got up and dressed carefully. Practical clothes, comfortable shoes, layers I could move in. Gerald was already downstairs making coffee. "You're up early," he said when I entered the kitchen. "Couldn't sleep. I think I'll take a drive. Clear my head." His expression sharpened. "A drive? Where?" "Just around. Maybe stop at the grocery store. We're low on milk." "I'll come with you." "No," I said too quickly. then softened it. I need some time alone. To think. Gerald set down his coffee mug with deliberate care. Louise, I don't think that's a good idea. You've been so confused lately. What if you get lost? What if something happens? I'll be fine. I've been driving these roads for 40 years. That's exactly my point. You're getting older. Your reflexes aren't what they were. And with your memory issues, I don't have memory issues. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Gerald's face shifted into that expression I'd come to recognize. The one that said I was proving his point, that my anger was evidence of instability. Sweetheart, he said gently, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Why don't you sit down, have some coffee, and we can talk about this calmly. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the trap closing. If I insisted on leaving, he'd call it irrational behavior. If I got angry, he'd call it emotional instability. If I gave in, I'd be admitting defeat. You're right, I said, forcing calm into my voice. I'm just feeling anxious. Some coffee sounds good. I sat at the table while Gerald poured, but my mind was racing. I needed to get to Julia Winters' office, needed to establish legal protection before the other attorney arrived. But Gerald was watching me now, suspicious and alert. I checked the time, 7:45. Julia Winters expected me at 8. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Julia Winters. If you can't make it to my office, I can come to you. But we need to meet before 2 p.m. Confirm location ASAP. Gerald glanced at my phone. Who's texting you this early? Spam, I said, deleting the message as he watched. But I'd memorized the number. Louise, Gerald said, sitting across from me. I need you to be honest with me. Are you feeling all right? Really? It was a test. Everything was a test now. I'm scared, I said truthfully. I'm scared of getting old, of losing myself, of being a burden. You could never be a burden. He reached across the table, taking my hand. That's why we need to get these documents signed today. So I can take care of you? So you don't have to worry about anything. What if I don't want to sign them? The question hung in the air between us. Gerald's grip on my hand tightened just slightly. Then I'd have to question whether you're capable of making that decision, he said quietly. And I'd have to do what's best for you, even if you don't understand it. There it was. The ultimatum I'd been expecting. Is that a threat, Gerald? It's a promise to protect you, even from yourself. He released my hand and stood. Richard will be here at 2. You should probably rest before then. Maybe take one of those pills Dr. Park prescribed for your anxiety. I didn't have any anxiety pills. Dr. Park had never prescribed any. But Gerald pulled a bottle from the kitchen cabinet and set it on the table. The prescription label had my name on it, dated 2 weeks ago. I don't remember getting these, I said. That's the problem, sweetheart. You don't remember a lot of things. He left the kitchen, and I stared at the pill bottle. Had Gerald been medicating me without my knowledge? Slipping drugs into my food or drink? How much of my supposed confusion had been chemically induced? I grabbed the bottle and my phone and locked myself in the downstairs bathroom. I photographed the label, then looked up the medication, a powerful anti-anxiety drug that caused drowsiness, confusion, and memory problems as side effects. They'd been drugging me. My hands shook as I texted Julia Winters' number. Can't leave house. Husband watching. He's drugging me. Need help now. The response came immediately. Address? I'm calling police. I typed our address, then stared at the message. If Julia called the police, if they came here, Gerald would tell them I was having delusions. He'd show them the affidavits, the doctor's notes, the medication prescribed for my anxiety. He'd say I was paranoid, unstable, refusing treatment. They'd believe him. I deleted the message and typed a new one. Don't call police yet. We'll create scene. Need different approach. Can you come at 2 p.m.? Witness attorney meeting? On my way. Stay calm. Don't take any medication. Don't sign anything. I flushed the pills down the toilet one by one, watching them disappear. Then I left the bathroom and found Gerald in his study. I'll sign the documents, I said. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. You will? Yes. You're right. I need to face reality. I need to let you take care of me. The lies tasted like poison. But I want Jane to be here when I sign. I want my daughter to understand what we're doing and why. Gerald considered this. Jane's not coming until tomorrow evening. Then we'll wait. Louise, we can't wait. Richard has other appointments. These documents need to be finalized today. Why today? Why the rush? His jaw tightened. Because it needs to be done. Because every day we delay is another day something could happen to you, and I wouldn't have the legal authority to help. One more day won't matter. It might. He stood, moving around the desk toward me. Louise, you're doing it again. You're being irrational. Fighting something that's for your own good. This is exactly the kind of behavior that concerns me. I backed toward the door. I just want my daughter here. Your daughter agrees with me. I've talked to Jane. She thinks this is necessary, too. Another lie. Jane had warned me not to sign anything. Then she can tell me that herself. Tomorrow, when she's here. Gerald's expression shifted into something I'd never seen before. Cold fury, barely contained. You're not going to make this easy, are you? I'm not trying to make anything hard. I just want... What you want doesn't matter anymore. The words exploded out of him and I flinched. You're sick, Louise. You're losing your mind, and you're too confused to see it. So, I'm going to do what needs to be done, whether you cooperate or not. He moved toward me, and for the first time in 42 years of marriage, I was afraid of my husband. I ran. I made it to the mudroom before Gerald caught my arm. Not roughly, he was too smart for that, but firmly enough that I couldn't pull away. Louise, stop. You're being hysterical. Let go of me. Not until you calm down. You're going to hurt yourself. I wrenched free and grabbed my coat from the hook, my bag from behind the boots. Gerald's eyes widened when he saw the bag, saw that it had been packed and hidden, saw that I'd been planning this. What is that? His voice went quiet, dangerous. What's in that bag? My things. I'm leaving. You're not going anywhere. He moved between me and the door. Louise, think about what you're doing. You're confused. You're scared. But running away isn't the answer. I'm not confused. I know exactly what you've been doing. The forged documents, the drugging, the conspiracy with Roger and Nancy. I know all of it. His face went carefully blank. Those are paranoid delusions, sweetheart. This is exactly what Dr. Park warned me about. Dr. Park, who wrote false notes about appointments I never had? Who prescribed medication I never agreed to? I pulled the pill bottle from my pocket and threw it at him. You've been poisoning me. Making me confused so you could claim I was incompetent. Gerald's mask cracked. You don't understand. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. Because I stopped taking whatever you were putting in my food. The anxiety medication that wasn't for anxiety at all. I was trying to help you. You were so agitated, so paranoid. I was normal. You created the problems so you could solve them. You and Roger needed my assets to cover his debts, so you decided the easiest way was to erase me. The doorbell rang. We both froze. Gerald glanced toward the front of the house, then back at me. Don't answer that. Why not? Afraid of witnesses? Louise, I'm warning you. I pushed past him and ran to the front door. Through the window, I could see a woman in a sharp gray suit holding a briefcase. Not Richard Palmer. Julia Winters. I opened the door. Gerald arrived seconds later, putting on his concerned husband face like a mask. May I help you? He asked. Mr. Morrison? I'm Julia Winters, attorney at law. Your wife contacted me regarding some legal concerns. I'm here to consult with her. Gerald's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. My wife is experiencing some cognitive difficulties. She's not in a position to hire an attorney. Is that so? Julia turned to me. Mrs. Morrison, did you contact my office requesting legal representation? I did. And do you understand why you contacted me? Because my husband and son have been systematically transferring my assets to themselves through fraud and forgery. Because they've been drugging me to create symptoms of cognitive decline. Because they plan to have me declared incompetent and committed to a memory care facility against my will. Julia looked at Gerald. She seems quite articulate to me. She's having an episode, Gerald said smoothly. These paranoid delusions, they come and go. Our family physician has documented it extensively. I'm actually expecting our attorney at 2 o'clock to finalize some protective measures. Richard Palmer? Julia's smile was sharp. Yes, I'm familiar with his work. Interesting how often his clients' elderly spouses end up in managed care facilities shortly after signing over power of attorney. Gerald's facade slipped. I don't know what my wife told you, but your wife told me enough that I spent last night reviewing public records. The property transfer filed 3 weeks ago. The investment accounts moved into your son's name. The suspiciously timed affidavits from neighbors and medical professionals. Julia opened her briefcase. Tell me, Mr. Morrison, does your wife's signature look like this? She held up copies of the transfer documents. Gerald went pale. I have a handwriting expert standing by, Julia continued, as well as statements from several people who'd be very interested to know they supposedly witnessed documents they never saw. Martha Henderson, for instance. She's quite upset to learn someone used her name fraudulently while she was in Florida. Those documents are legitimate, Gerald stammered. Louise signed them. She just doesn't remember. Actually, I said quietly, I never signed anything, and I have proof. I pulled out my phone and played the recording from Christmas night. Nancy's voice filled the front hallway. The farmhouse, the accounts, everything. She thinks it's all still in both your names. Gerald's voice. It is. Technically. Nancy. Technically isn't legally. You signed those transfer documents 3 months ago. Roger is already listed as primary owner. Your wife just doesn't know it yet. Julia's expression was triumphant. Gerald's was devastated. You can't. He struggled for words. That's an illegal recording. It's inadmissible. Actually, Julia said, in Connecticut, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. Your wife consented. She was there. The recording is perfectly legal. Gerald turned to me, and I saw something like betrayal in his eyes. You were in the closet. You heard everything. Everything, I confirmed. Including the part where you discussed having me evaluated for cognitive decline to make the transition easier to explain. How I'd thank you eventually, once I was settled somewhere more appropriate. Louise, please. You have to understand, Roger was desperate. He made bad investments. He was going to lose everything. We had to help him. By stealing from me? It's not stealing. You're our family. Everything we have, we built together. The money, the property, it's all family assets. We were just reorganizing things to protect Roger's future. My grandmother built this house, I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning inside me. My inheritance, my home, and you decided it was yours to give away because your son made poor choices. He's your son too. A son who was willing to have his mother institutionalized to cover his debts. A car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I watched Roger and Nancy emerge, followed by a silver-haired man I recognized as Richard Palmer. Reinforcements, Julia murmured. This should be interesting. The 3 of them approached the house, stopping short when they saw the open door and the standoff in the hallway. Dad, Roger called. What's going on? Why is there another car here? Your mother hired an attorney, Gerald said flatly. Nancy's face went white. Roger just looked confused. Come in, I said. All of you. Let's have this conversation properly. We moved to the living room, the same room where I'd hosted the Christmas party just days ago. The room where I'd smiled and served drinks while my family plotted against me. Julia took command immediately. I'm Julia Winters, representing Mrs. Morrison. I believe you're all here regarding power of attorney documents that Mr. Morrison wants his wife to sign. I'm here to inform you that won't be happening. Richard Palmer cleared his throat. Ms. Winters, with all due respect, I've been the Morrison family attorney for 15 years. I'm confident Louise Morrison understands perfectly well that the documents you're carrying would give her husband complete control of her life, her assets, and her freedom, Julia interrupted. She also understands that several transfers of property and accounts have already occurred without her knowledge or consent. Those transfers were legitimate, Palmer said, but his voice lacked conviction. Show me her signature on the authorization forms. Palmer hesitated, then opened his briefcase and pulled out documents. Julia examined them, then handed them to me. "Mrs. Morrison, is this your signature?" I studied the signature at the bottom of the page. It was close, very close, but not quite right. The capital E had a flourish I'd stopped using after my mother died, returning to the simpler version she'd taught me as a child. "No," I said. "That's not my signature. You signed it 3 months ago," Gerald insisted. "You were sitting right there, at the kitchen table. I watched you sign it. Then you watched someone forge my signature. Because I never signed this document. I never even saw it." Roger spoke for the first time, his voice uncertain. "Mom, Dad showed me the papers. He said you'd agreed, that you understood we needed to protect the estate." "Protect it from whom, Roger? From me?" I looked at my son, seeing him properly for the first time in months. He looked tired, scared, young, despite being 40 years old. "What did they tell you?" "That you were getting sick, that you needed help managing things, that if we didn't act now, you might make decisions that would hurt the family." He glanced at Nancy, then back at me. "They said you were confused, that you'd thank us later. And you believed them? Without talking to me? Without asking me if any of it was true? You're my mother. I trust Dad. I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought I was helping you." Nancy gripped his arm. "Roger, don't let her manipulate you. She's doing exactly what they warned us about. Becoming paranoid, turning against family." "Enough," Julia said sharply. "Mrs. Morrison, show them the rest." I pulled out the flash drive I'd prepared. "I have copies of everything from your study, Gerald. The loan documents showing Roger owes $300,000. Your investment losses that you hid from me for 2 years. The emails between you and Nancy planning this entire scheme. The false affidavits. The prescription for medication I never agreed to take." I looked at Richard Palmer. All of it documenting a systematic campaign of financial fraud and elder abuse. The room went silent. Palmer stood abruptly. "I need to speak with my client privately." "Your client can speak right here," Julia said. "In fact, I think everyone should hear this. Mr. Morrison, you have 2 choices. 1, we go to the police with all of this evidence. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. You're looking at serious criminal charges. Your son, too, as a beneficiary of the fraudulent transfers." Roger made a strangled sound. Nancy's grip on his arm tightened. "Or 2, Julia continued, you agree to immediately reverse all fraudulent transfers, restore Mrs. Morrison's full access to all accounts, remove yourself from all property titles that rightfully belong to her, and sign a legal agreement stipulating that you will never again attempt to gain control of her assets or person. You'll also agree to a complete forensic accounting of all marital assets to ensure nothing else has been hidden or transferred." "And if we choose option 2? Gerald asked quietly. "Then Mrs. Morrison won't press charges. You'll remain married if that's what you both want. But you'll do so with clear legal boundaries. And if you ever try something like this again, everything we have, every recording, every document, every piece of evidence, goes straight to the district attorney." Gerald looked at me with something like wonder. "You were planning this, all along. You weren't confused or scared. You were gathering evidence." "I was protecting myself," I said, "from the man who promised to love and protect me until death do us part. I do love you. I was trying to steal my home, to drug me, to have me locked away. That's not love, Gerald. That's control." Richard Palmer was already packing up his briefcase. "Gerald, I strongly advise you to accept Ms. Winters's terms, because if this goes to trial, you won't just lose. You'll go to prison." Gerald sat heavily on the sofa I'd reupholstered myself 5 years ago. He suddenly looked old, defeated. "I accept the terms," he said quietly. "Dad," Roger started. "We accept the terms," Gerald repeated louder. "All of them." Julia pulled out documents from her own briefcase. "These are preliminary agreements. We'll need to formalize everything with detailed filings. But these establish the immediate reversal of fraudulent transfers and restoration of Mrs. Morrison's legal rights. Sign them. Now." Gerald signed without reading them. His hand shook as he wrote his name. Roger? Julia prompted. My son looked at me, his eyes wet. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was like this. You knew enough, I said quietly. You knew I wasn't part of the decision. You knew your father was keeping secrets from me. You chose not to ask questions because you wanted the inheritance more than you wanted the truth. That's not fair. Sign the papers, Roger. He signed. Julia turned to Nancy. You're not on the property titles, but you were part of the conspiracy. I want a statement from you acknowledging your participation, and I want that recording device you hid in the hallway closet. Nancy's face flushed. Don't lie. Give it to me now, or I add you to the criminal complaint as a co-conspirator. Nancy pulled the device from her purse with shaking hands. Julia collected all the signed documents, the recording device, and made notes on her tablet. This is binding. Any violation, and we proceed with criminal charges. Mrs. Morrison retains sole ownership of this property. She has full control of all accounts that were in her name. Mr. Morrison, you'll remain in the house only if your wife agrees to it. Otherwise, you'll need to find other accommodations. She looked at me. It's your choice, Mrs. Morrison. Do you want him to leave? I looked at Gerald. At 42 years of marriage, at the father of my children, at the man who'd plotted to erase me. Part of me wanted to tell him to pack his bags and get out. Part of me just felt tired. I need time, I said finally. Time to think about what I want. What comes next? That's fair, Julia said. She handed me copies of all the documents. Keep these safe. And Mrs. Morrison, you did this. You saved yourself. Not many people have that kind of strength. After they all left, Julia to her car, Palmer practically fleeing, Roger and Nancy retreating without a word, I stood in my living room with Gerald. I never meant to hurt you, he said. But you did. You meant to erase me, to make me doubt my own mind, to take everything my grandmother built and give it to Roger without even telling me. I panicked. When I lost that money, when Roger came to me desperate, I panicked. And then it spiraled. Each lie needed another lie to cover it. Each step led to the next. Until suddenly we were here. You could have stopped at any point. You could have told me the truth. Would you have forgiven me? I thought about it honestly. I don't know. But at least you would have given me the choice. You would have treated me like a partner instead of an obstacle. Gerald nodded slowly. What happens now? Now you sleep in the guest room. Now I decide whether 42 years of marriage is worth saving after you tried to destroy me. Now I figure out who I am without you. And us? There is no us right now. There's you and there's me, and we're living in the same house because I'm choosing to allow it. But Gerald? I looked him in the eye. If you ever try anything like this again, if you ever make me doubt myself or lie to me or conspire behind my back, I will end you. Legally, financially, completely. Do you understand? I understand. He left the room and I sank onto the sofa, my body finally releasing the tension I'd been holding for days. My phone buzzed. A text from Jane. Got an earlier flight. Landing in 2 hours. Is everything okay? I smiled through unexpected tears. Everything's fine. I handled it. Can't wait to see you. Another text, this one from Dr. Aldridge. Julia Winters just called me. She told me what happened. I'm so proud of you, Mrs. Morrison. You're a warrior. I wasn't a warrior. I was just a 66-year-old woman who'd refused to disappear quietly. I walked through my house, my grandmother's house, my house, touching familiar walls, looking at family photos that now meant something different. The picture of our wedding day, Roger's baby photos, holidays and birthdays and 42 years of memories, all now viewed through the lens of betrayal, but also viewed through the lens of survival. I'd won. Not through violence or vengeance, but through patience, intelligence, and careful documentation. I'd been underestimated because of my age, dismissed because of my kindness, and I'd used that underestimation against them. They'd thought I was the victim in this story. They'd been wrong. Jane arrived at 6 that evening, bursting through the front door with her overnight bag and wrapping me in a fierce hug that lasted a full minute. Mom. Oh my God, Mom. I got your text that everything was handled, but I've been terrified the whole flight. What happened? Are you okay? I led her to the kitchen and made tea while I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through shock, rage, and finally something like grim satisfaction. Dad actually tried to have you committed? She looked toward the stairs, where Gerald had retreated to the guest room. And Roger went along with it? Roger thought he was helping. Your father convinced him I was sick. That's not an excuse. Jane's jaw was tight. He should have talked to you, should have questioned it. Instead, he just... She stopped, struggling for words. Where is he now? Home, I assume. With Nancy. They signed the agreements and left. Good. I don't want to see him. She paused. Actually, that's not true. I want to see him so I can tell him exactly what I think of him. But that can wait. She reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have been here. Should have noticed something was wrong. You're 3,000 miles away with your own family. You couldn't have known. But I talk to you every week. I should have heard something in your voice. Should have... Jane. I squeezed her hand. I didn't even know what was happening until I heard that recording. They were good at it. Subtle. They made me doubt myself without me even realizing it was happening. How did you figure it out? How did you know to start gathering evidence? I told her about hiding in the closet, about the recording device, about the voice memo on my phone that had captured everything, about the moment I'd realized my entire life had been built on a lie. And then what? Jane asked. You just started investigating? I started paying attention, really paying attention, to inconsistencies, to things that didn't add up. And once I started looking, I found evidence everywhere. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos, the documents, the recordings. Your father wasn't as careful as he thought. Or maybe he just didn't think I was capable of outsmarting him. Jane's smile was fierce. That was his mistake. We sat in silence for a moment, drinking tea in the kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, where I'd raised 2 children, where I'd thought I was building a life with a partner who loved me. What happens now? Jane asked quietly. With Dad? I don't know yet. The lawyer, Julia Winters. You'll meet her tomorrow. She advised me to take time before making any permanent decisions. To let the dust settle. See how I feel when the shock wears off. Do you still love him? The question hung in the air. I considered it honestly. I loved the man I thought he was. The man I built 42 years with. But that man might never have existed. Or maybe he did exist once, and fear turned him into someone else. I looked at Jane. I don't know if I can forgive what he did, but I also don't know if I can erase 4 decades of my life. You don't have to decide tonight. No, I don't. Gerald appeared in the kitchen doorway, hesitant. Jane, I didn't hear you arrive. My daughter stood, and I saw her struggle between the father she'd known all her life and the man who'd tried to destroy her mother. I'm here, she said coolly. To support Mom, not to see you. He flinched. I understand. But Jane, I hope someday you'll let me explain. Explain what? How you drugged Mom? How you forged her signature? How you tried to steal her home? Her voice was rising. What explanation makes any of that okay? None of it was okay, I know that. But I was desperate. Roger was going to lose everything and You decided Mom was expendable. That's what you're not saying. You decided it was easier to erase her than to face your own failures. Gerald's face crumpled. For a moment he looked like a stranger, this broken, diminished man wearing my husband's face. You're right. That's exactly what I decided. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. Regret isn't enough, Jane said. You need to understand what you almost did. You almost destroyed her. You almost took a strong, intelligent, capable woman and locked her away because she was inconvenient. Do you understand how monstrous that is? I do now. He looked at me. Louise, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know. I never stopped loving you. Even when I was plotting against you, I told myself I was protecting you. That once you were settled somewhere safe, you'd be taken care of. You'd be comfortable. Comfortable in a prison, I said quietly. Because that's what it would have been, Gerald. A nice prison, but still a prison. And you would have had my power of attorney. Would have controlled every aspect of my life. Made every decision for me. I thought you'd be happier. Not having to worry about anything. I'm 66, not incompetent. I don't need someone to make me happy by taking away my autonomy. I need to be trusted, respected, treated like an equal partner. I know that now. Jane made a sound of disgust. You knew it before. You just chose to ignore it when it was inconvenient. She was right, of course. But looking at Gerald, at the father of my children, at the man I'd shared most of my life with, I saw something I hadn't expected to see. Genuine remorse. Not the manipulative concern he'd shown before, but real, devastating understanding of what he'd done. It didn't excuse anything, but it was something. I'm going to bed, Jane announced. Mom, you should too. You look exhausted. She was right. I was exhausted down to my bones, not just from the past few days, but from months of subtle manipulation, of second-guessing myself, of living in a house where everyone was lying. I'll stay down here a while longer, I said. But you go ahead. Your old room is ready. After Jane left, Gerald and I stood in the kitchen, the silence between us heavy with everything unsaid. I'll move out if you want, he said finally. Tomorrow, if that's what you need. I don't know what I need yet. But Gerald, if you stay, things are different. I control my own finances, my own property, my own life. You don't make decisions for me. You don't protect me from things I'm capable of handling. We're equals, or we're nothing. We're equals, he said immediately. Whatever you want, however you want to structure this. And you get help, therapy, because what you did, the lying, the manipulation, the willingness to sacrifice me for Roger, that's not normal. That's not healthy. And I won't live with someone who might do it again. I'll go tomorrow. Find someone, I promise. I nodded, too tired to say more. I went upstairs, passing the guest room where Gerald would sleep, passing Jane's old room where I could hear her on the phone with her wife. I went to my bedroom, my grandmother's bedroom before it was mine, and lay down on the bed, still fully clothed. My phone buzzed. A text from Roger. Mom, can we talk? Please? I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Not tonight. Maybe not for a while. I need time. His response came immediately. I understand. But Mom, I'm so sorry. I was stupid and selfish and I almost destroyed everything. I don't know how to fix it. You can't fix it, I typed. You can only be better. And it's going to take a long time before I trust you again. I know. I'll wait. However long it takes. And I set the phone aside and closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept replaying the past few days. The discovery, the investigation, the confrontation. I kept seeing Gerald's face when the recording played, Nancy's mask dropping, Roger's confused guilt. But mostly, I kept seeing myself, the woman in the closet, listening to her family plot against her, the woman who could have collapsed under the weight of that betrayal but chose instead to fight back, the woman who'd spent 66 years being kind and accommodating, and who'd finally learned that kindness didn't mean accepting abuse. I'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. 3 weeks later, I sat in Julia Winters' office reviewing the final documents. Every fraudulent transfer had been reversed. Every account was back in my name. The farmhouse deed listed me as sole owner, with Gerald removed entirely per my request. You could have taken more, Julia said, reviewing the settlement. His retirement accounts, half the investments. You'd be entitled to them in a divorce. I don't want a divorce. Not yet anyway. I just want control of what's mine. And he's complying with everything? Completely. He's in therapy twice a week. He gave me access to all his accounts, all his passwords. He asks before making any decision that might affect me. I paused. It's strange. Like living with a stranger who looks like my husband. That might be who he always was. And you're just seeing it clearly now. I nodded slowly. Maybe. Or maybe he's become someone new. Someone who understands what he almost lost. I don't know if that's enough, but it's something. Julia closed the file. What about your son? Roger paid back the loan. He sold their summer house, took a second mortgage on their primary residence. Nancy wasn't happy about it, but he insisted. I smiled without humor. He calls every few days. Asks how I am. Doesn't push. I think he's starting to understand the magnitude of what he was part of. And you? How are you doing with all of this? The question surprised me. In all the legal proceedings, the document signing, the account transfers, no one had asked me that. I'm angry, I said honestly. I'm hurt. I'm betrayed. But I'm also proud? Is that strange? I'm proud that I fought back, that I didn't let them erase me. That's not strange at all. You did something most people in your situation never do. You recognized abuse, documented it, and stopped it. That takes incredible strength. Or incredible stubbornness. Julia laughed. Sometimes they're the same thing. I left her office and drove home through familiar roads, past the Henderson house where Martha was back from Florida and had apologized profusely for being manipulated into signing that affidavit. Past the church where Gerald and I had been married 42 years ago. Past the elementary school where both my children had learned to read. Everything looked the same, but I saw it all differently now. At home, I found Gerald in the kitchen making dinner, something he'd started doing without being asked, trying to contribute in small ways to a household he'd nearly destroyed. Chicken piccata, he said. Your favorite. Thank you. We ate together in careful politeness, the easy intimacy of 4 decades replaced by cautious distance. After dinner, he cleaned up while I went to the sunroom with a book I'd been trying to read for weeks. Jane called, as she did every evening now. How was the lawyer meeting? Final. Everything settled legally. Now it's just life. Are you keeping him? The question was only half joking. I don't know yet. Some days I think yes. Some days I think I'm being a fool. Most days I just don't know. There's no rush, Mom. You get to decide on your own timeline. Not his, not Roger's, not anyone's but yours. After we hung up, I sat in the sunroom watching snow fall across the fields my great-grandfather had cleared, the barn my grandfather had built, the gardens my grandmother had planted. 4 generations of women in this house, building and preserving and fighting for what was theirs. My grandmother had survived the Depression. My mother had survived losing her husband young, and I had survived my own family trying to erase me. We were strong women, the women of this house. Maybe that's what Gerald had forgotten. Or maybe he'd never known it at all. The sunroom door opened. Gerald stood there, uncertain. Do you want company? Or should I leave you alone? I considered. You can stay. He sat in the chair opposite mine, and we watched the snow fall in silence. After a long moment, he spoke. I've been thinking about what you said, about how I treated you like you were incompetent. And I realized, I think I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of getting old. Of becoming obsolete. You were always so capable, so strong. You never needed me the way I thought you should. And when the money problem started, when Roger came to me desperate, I panicked. I thought if I couldn't provide, couldn't fix things, then what was I for? You were supposed to be my partner. Not my provider or my protector. My equal. I know that now. But I didn't then. I was raised thinking a man's job was to take care of his family, to solve problems, to be strong. And when I couldn't do that legitimately, I tried to do it through control, through making you need me by making you seem helpless. It was the most honest thing he'd said in months, maybe in years. That's not love, Gerald. That's ego. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The words had been said before, but tonight they sounded different, less defensive, more devastated. Sorry isn't enough, I said quietly, but it's a start. We sat together as darkness fell, 2 people who'd spent 42 years together, learning they'd never really known each other at all. Maybe we could build something new from the ruins, or maybe this was just the long goodbye, stretched out over months or years. Either way, I would survive it. Because I'd learned something essential in that closet on Christmas night. I was stronger than anyone had given me credit for, including myself. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Aldridge. I'm writing a paper on elder abuse recognition and prevention. Would you be willing to let me share your story, anonymously? You could help so many others. I typed back, yes. If it helps even one person recognize what's happening to them, it's worth it. Because that was the real victory. Not just saving myself, but potentially saving others. showing that a 66-year-old woman could outsmart, outmaneuver, and overcome people who thought age made her vulnerable. Gerald and I sat in the sunroom until the snow stopped falling and the moon rose over the frozen fields. And in that moment, I understood something profound. I'd spent my whole life being what other people needed me to be. A good wife, a good mother, a good neighbor. Now, finally, I was learning to be what I needed to be. Myself. Complete. Autonomous. Undiminished. The farmhouse stood solid around me, built by strong women, preserved by strong women, reclaimed by strong women. And I sat in my grandmother's favorite room, in the house she'd built with her own hands and her own will, and I knew with absolute certainty that I belonged here. Not because someone allowed me to stay, but because this was mine, my heritage, my home, my life. And no one would ever take it from me again. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.